Get your swimsuit, get your sunblock, and get to the beach with the Long Island Railroad Getaway Deal. Get discounted round-trip rail fare, plus access to Jones Beach, Long Beach, Fire Island, or the Hamptons. Just click mta.info/LIRR/getaways.
Well, it's great to be back. Yeah, I'm talking about me. I'm back for another podcast. Excited. We didn't have one last week, but it was mainly to several issues that we ran into not having a podcast. And we're back, and it's just like at the stroke of 8, everyone starts coming through the door. You gotta love it. It's Late Night Parents. This is Ted Hicks back for the weekly podcast. Ways to catch the show, latenightparents.com. For those of you that I'm going to use the word lazy, lnp.tv. Either way, you get to our website. Ways to hit us on social media through Twitter. You can follow me. Look for me on the Real Ted Hicks, RealTedHicks, or you can follow us at Late Night Parent. Facebook.com/Late Night Parents. Yeah, those are our sites. You can catch us on iHeart. You can catch us on iTunes and Spreaker and SoundCloud and everywhere else that you could possibly find us. So we do this with the best radio partners in the world. I got to stop saying radio and lean more towards media partners in the world. Our home Wednesday nights is on Blog Talk Radio, Happy Hour Network. Thank you once again to Mr. Val, Mr. Vanderberg. As always, you guys help me pull through with the happenings of this network. So every Wednesday night, 8 p.m., we're on Blog Talk Live. Other ways to catch us, you can catch us. We're all over the internet, believe it or not. You and I are One Radio. Mr. Scott Price, want to say thank you. We're on Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern. Life Improvement Radio. Eric, what's going on? We're on Mondays, 10 a.m. I-95 Sports Network, they play us all the time. I can't even tell you. We're listed for Wednesdays at 2, but I find that impossible when our Wednesday night show is on at 8 p.m. But maybe they play the other show. We're the show within a show within a show, inside of a website. So other items here, other people we have to thank. Tiz Shearer in the UK, XRP Radio. Thank you, as always. Our friends out in New Zealand, Cindy Conroy, thank you for playing the podcast. Do I have everyone covered? Arena Sports Network plays us every night, 12 a.m. How about that? We got a late night show. Well, it's called Late Night Parents or something, right? You got to be on 12 a.m. That's Arena Sports Network. Mr. Brian Snow. I'm actually going to be on one of his podcasts tomorrow night, 7 p.m. He does Snowman in the morning, but I'm going to be on there. Who else? I want to make sure I don't miss anyone. So we have the Wednesday night podcast, and we also have the Saturday radio show. And you say, what's the difference? Well, one's a podcast, strictly on the internet. Another one's on terrestrial. And that's on 1240 AM WGBB that airs out here, Long Island, New York. I want to thank good friends at WGBB, Mr. Jeff Lowe, who is remarkable. Brian, who's, I'd like to say, my main engineer, who helps us with the Saturday show. Really, we got a lot of good folks around us. I want to thank our friends and one of our sponsors, Verizon Wireless, Verizon Fios. You're going to hear that promo in a second. I want to thank our friends at Verizon Fios for supporting us, supporting the AM radio show, supporting our podcast, and just the overall movement. I want to thank our good friends, DTHK. No, excuse me. I'm sorry. These guys are going to get me. Don't Hate the King. Don'tHateTheKing.com. Makes all different types of apparel and everything else like that. I'm sorry for screwing you guys up. I'm going off the top of my head. More importantly, I want to thank our friends at the Happy Hour Network. As always, you're going to hear that promo shortly. And you'll also hear my Saturday promo. So this is kind of like the little podcast and radio show that could. Tomorrow we're going to have a special show, 12 noon, Thursday, with the author of Standing Strong by Diane Reeve and Jenna Glatzer. It's a triumphant true crime story in which a diverse group of women band together in a landmark legal case against the man who deceived them all. So imagine it's the Dallas Buyers Club meets Erin Brockovich. That's going to be tomorrow. So no, I won't be at work tomorrow. And on Friday, so during the summers, on Fridays at my place of employment, we have Summer Fridays. So not a half day, we have the entire day off. So I'm just stretching it during this summer with taking Thursdays off. Don't be mad at me. Everyone else who has Summer Fridays has that same ability. So that's for some of my ramblings and going ons. At 10 minutes past the hour, we're going to have guests Poppy and Geoff Spencer, co-authors of the book 1BillionSeconds, a fictional memoir. It's a wonderful couple. I've spoken with them primarily through email and with their publicists. Excited to have them on. We're going to talk about the happenings with them and how they got around to writing the book and inspirations for it. And they're going to be allowed to tell their story. And that's the great thing about Late Night Parents, because everyone has a story to tell. And I get to, I guess, facilitate it, because I'm not that very, I don't know. I don't find myself to be such of an interesting person. But that's why we have the right people here to tell their stories. And lastly, before I go into the promo, Late Night Parents, we talk about the latest and greatest with game changers in the fields of sports, technology, parenting, and product reviews. We haven't done a product review in a while. We're going to do one next week with TeenSafe. Got a new mobile app that's going to, all the kids that are deleting text messages through all of these third-party apps like WhatsApp app and GroupMe and Kik and everything else like that. TeenSafe has a solution for parents that's going to allow you to be able to kind of like wind that phone back and allow you to read those text messages. How about that? That's what I mean. When you're a parent, you got to stay on top of your child in this technology-driven world. So with this, I'm going to play the promo, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Geoff and Poppy Spencer. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, wrong promo. How about that? I was doing so well. I was talking about the promo, and then I played the wrong promo. One of those nights. I know Geoff and Poppy are laughing in the background. All right, here's the right promo, folks.
I am loving my Verizon FiOS. In fact, I recently joked that if we move, we have to find a place with FiOS coverage. To my surprise, our family actually agreed. Not only is FiOS the fastest internet service, it also has never been down, with the exception of when Storm Sandy hit us. And indeed, only FiOS gives you the same speed uploading for your files, photos, etc., as it does downloading as in HD movies. Cable cannot offer you this, only FiOS. So go ahead,
Audible
make a
is
very
offering
smart
our
choice
listeners
with
a free
Verizon
audiobook of your
FiOS.
choice and a free 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/late-night-parents and choose from over 180,000 audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/late-night-parents. That's audibletrial.com/late-night-parents and get started today. Why Audible? Audible content includes more than 180,000 audio programs from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers, and business information providers.
Are you looking for some sick sports apparel? DHTK designed some of the newest and coolest brands such as Represent, Game Over, and Don't Hate the King. DHTK's vision is to integrate culture, fashion, and attitude that best represents the players and caters to us, the fans. Click on DHTK.com and subscribe to their mailing list for an automatic 10% off your order. If you are a basketball fan, follow DHTK on social media. Visit DHTK.com for more details. DHTK.com. You don't have to be a king to dress like one.
Try listening to the Happy Hour Network on Blog Talk Radio. The Happy Hour Network features live shows such as Late Night Parents with Ted Hicks, Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue with Ted, Todd Vandenberg, and Lee Vowell, The Seahawks Show with Kevin Daggett, and NBA Full Court Press with Danny Thompson. You can also catch podcasts like The SWAT Show, the Earnestly Speaking Podcast, Cinema Savants, and The Tennis Scene, found at blogtalkradio.com/Happy Hour Network. The Happy Hour Network, radio worth listening
host of
to.
Late Night Parents. We call it L&P Live. On Saturdays at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, we speak with game changers in the world of sports, technology, education, and product reviews. Why, you ask? Because parents do matter. Saturday, 4:30 p.m., Late Night Parents. We're live and exclusively on 1240 a.m. WGBB. Well, it's that Saturday, or 4:30 p.m., and we're not on WGBB. I guess I didn't lease that time yet. But no, just joking. It's, as we've said before, the Late Night Parent Podcast. This is Ted Hicks. I'm happy to introduce two people. Poppy and Geoff Spencer, co-authors of the new book, 1BillionSeconds, a Fictional Memoir. There's so much that we have to cover. Guess what? They're our only guests tonight because I was kind of unsure how the conversation would go or the length of the conversation. So rather than, and this is going to be something I'm going to do more in the future, when there's some guests that their portfolio is so endowed that I'm not going to have anyone behind them because season one, we book-ended people and people were, I kind of had to rush through the interviews in 10 minutes or 12 minutes because the next person was kind of sitting in the queue. So there's something else we're trying this season for season 2. So Geoff and Poppy, how are you guys doing?
We are great. Thanks for having us.
Good evening. How are you, Ted?
Wonderful, wonderful. And I want to thank you guys because last week you were so flexible with your schedule. I had a mishap. My mishap was called Nehemiah Hicks. That's my 9-year-old son, and he was playing catch at summer camp. And summer camp had just started, and believe it or not, he was hit in his eye, took his eye off the ball. He said the famous words, he said, last catch, where every parent cringes because they're just like, oh my goodness, would you come on and get in the car? And guess what? Took his eye off the ball hit him in the eye. It was so swollen that I was like, uh-oh, someone might be going to the doctor because, certain things run through your mind. You're like, oh my goodness, this doesn't look good. How do we deal with this? I'm not sure. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a information technology professional. It's kind of, we kind of stay in our lane. But with all of that being said, you guys, I was able to go through your publicist, and thankfully you guys weren't angry with me. I kind of gave you a one-liner like, guys, I can't do it tonight. I got a family emergency. And I guess you noticed the tone in my email, if that's even possible.
All you have to say is family emergency, and that just covers it, because anybody who has kids knows that takes priority.
Yes, I'm a mother of 4 kids. You don't even have to say anything.
Well, I want to thank you guys for being flexible.
Sure.
I tell you, there's so much to cover. The co-authors of your new book, 1 Billion Seconds, a fictional memoir, and you guys are based in Sarasota, Florida. I spent about 15 years ago. I spent a short time in Valrico, Florida, which is like right outside of Tampa, and I was working. This is going to really date myself. I was working on a Windows 2000 project down in Florida, and you think about, you hear something like that, you're like, wow, oh my goodness, you're old. But there's so much good advice that you guys can share. You can share on marriage, on life. Let's just dig in and give us a little backstory about you guys.
Well, I'll give you a very quick, first of all, thank you for mentioning our book, 1 Billion Seconds. Poppy and I have, we think, a wonderful life story. Poppy was my college sweetheart back at Rollins College, also in Florida, near Orlando in Winter Park, Florida.
Yes.
And Poppy was a senior, and I was a junior. And we dated the entire school year, and it was absolutely wonderful and fabulous. And first love, Poppy always is happy to say that I was her first love. And as the year came to an end, I, being a 21-year-old guy, Ted, therefore not very smart and not with any great forward-looking vision, let this wonderful relationship sort of slip away. I didn't plan any future. I didn't think of what we were going to be doing the next year, because I was coming back to school. Poppy was not. Poppy had a great career ahead of her back in her hometown of Milwaukee. And so very suddenly Poppy decided to made a decision when I didn't answer a question very well about what's going to happen next year. She decided I didn't really care and broke us up. And so we had a very sudden breakup that was for all the wrong reasons. Nothing was wrong. And I didn't deal with it well, and I was very angry. And basically, that was the end of our relationship. 32 years went by. 1 billion seconds. 32 years is 1 billion seconds. And there wasn't a drop of contact, nothing. And I was sure that this woman wanted nothing to do with me for 32 years until I had the thought one day, when I was a divorced guy, and my second marriage had gone by, and I said, gosh, whatever happened to that great gal back in college? And I quickly did a Google search, found her Facebook page, found her website, found her phone number, called her, and within about a minute I was giving her a call, and I quickly discovered that she never, ever wanted any of that to happen, that she'd looked for me 3 different times to no avail over those 3 decades, and that she still felt the same way, and I quickly discovered that I still did too. I realized that I never, ever had fallen out of love, just got interrupted. And so
Geoff,
we were
Geoff,
back.
Jeff, I have to stop you right here, because I was going to say that's the key thing right there. The fact, I don't know if I want to use the term soulmate, but
you can.
I think I would have, when I look it up in the Webster's dictionary, it's going to be a picture of you two guys. Go ahead with your story. I just had to.
Well, the very first time I saw Poppy, after a couple of weeks, we finally got together at the Sarasota airport. I flew in from where I was then living. I was living up in the Davidson, North Carolina, near Charlotte. And I flew down, and she was bouncing up and down holding a sign that said, "Soulmate."
Oh, my God.
Yeah, a former cheerleader in high school, okay? I had to do it.
So the reason we wrote the book, whenever we tell the story to people, they were like, oh, my goodness, that is such a wonderful story. It sounds like a Hallmark movie or something. Like you should write a book. And so we said, you know what? We probably should write a book, because there was a lot of things that happened during those 32 years in between, Ted, that was normal life.
Do you have any money? And Ted, I had 4 children, 2 teenagers living at home at the time that we reconnected, and I was very hesitant at first to to, like, do I pursue my own happiness? What about my kids?
Right.
This is a transitional time. I taught psychology for 8 years, and I worked with teenagers. I worked with at-risk teenagers. I knew all about the challenging times that were ahead of them, and I thought, I don't know if I can bring, them into this fold. Jeff has one son. What if they don't get along? All of these questions went through my mother brain, and but it did work out.
Hey, I do have a quick question, because you guys did touch upon it. Truly, how many times did you guys think of each other through those years?
Well, it's a topic we hit in the book, because there was any time something would be referenced that we had shared. If I walk into a restaurant and they have poppy seed muffins, or someone mentions the school and first loves, and someone mentions her sorority, the Kappa Alpha Theta. Anything that would just hit that little memory bell would make me think of Poppy, and vice versa. She says the same thing.
Well, Jeff has a mustache, so I've never kissed a man with a mustache, the only one. And I have to say, with my 3 daughters, because he was my first love, when they were in high school and heading off to college, inadvertently, I wasn't even aware of it, unconsciously, I used Jeff as the template for finding a decent guy. Make sure he's trustworthy, make sure he's good to you, make sure, he's a kind person. And I only know that because when we reconnected and I told my daughters, who were in their 20s at the time, we got back together, I said, do you remember me talking about him? And they were like, Mom, you talked about him all the time. And I said, I did not. So apparently I did, and I wasn't aware of it, even with, now an ex-husband, but at the time, I'm sure I referred to him as this wonderful, kind man, and he was very kind. So we thought of each other quite a bit, and we have some amazing things that happen in the book. The reason we call it a fictional memoir is that we have an entity that tells the story, so that each chapter of the book isn't Poppy Jeff. It's just one narration, and it's kind of like a divine spirit that maybe puts us together. We call this character Jessie, either male or female. The reader can determine that. And Jessie is a relational choreographer and is tasked with putting people together. And Jessie puts us together in college and messes up. And, we separate. And so is plagued by guilt for 32 years, or 1 billion seconds, why Jessie, he or she, couldn't resolve and make, sort of have a do-over, with this couple.
Right. Hey, I do have a question for both of you guys.
Sure.
How often was it in your minds, because both of you were previously, married, you both were married twice?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. How often was it compare and contrast? Maybe you didn't say it, but you always, the person, your husband or your wife at the time, did you compare each other to?
Comparing spouses that we were with back to Poppy, and is that what you're asking?
Back to Poppy. Yes, back to Poppy and Jeff.
Yeah, I don't think we really did a whole lot of that.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, okay.
Both of us went, and I think we can both say that with our marriages, we were both all in. I never, ever would have looked for him when I was married, ever.
Okay.
I never even tiptoed on social media or did that until I was no longer married. And, we both happened to be available. The 3 times that I looked for him in the 90s, and then in 2000, which is what we'll touch on later, 2002, as a matter of fact. Both times, the first time I was not married. The second time I was married, but it was a very horrific thing. So I'll let Geoff share that.
Poppy reached out for me back in 2002 because she discovered through a very bizarre way, she was taking her daughter to a school to look at a college in Ohio Wesleyan. And while she was having a conversation with a woman over lunch, she discovered something that stunned her. Poppy and I when we were back in college days, Ted, we were so crazy about each other that we went through the steps of introducing our parents and family, our respective brothers, to each other, to our sweethearts. And so Poppy had met my brother, and she discovered through this person at a luncheon many years later.
And this is in a group of 250 strangers. I knew nobody. I just driven to Ohio for the day.
She discovered. She mentioned my family because this lady was from Cleveland, where I grew up, and the conversation went forward. And Poppy said, "Did you know Geoff Spencer?" And this woman got a kind of a surprised and almost alarmed look, and Poppy was like, kind of thinking to herself with a funny look. She discovers that through this woman about my brother. My brother, unfortunately, Ted, was lost in 9/11. He was one of those in the Twin Towers. He was in the South Tower when the attacks took place, and he perished with that. And that is how she discovered about my brother, this guy who she'd met, and so that was, a reason for her to reach out to say, "Oh my gosh, what you wanted to say, I heard about your brother, and I'm sorry." But unfortunately, this is back in it's talking about, dating yourself.
It's pre-Google.
Yeah, this is pre-Google days. This is, back in the dark ages when we called information to find people,
So, and unfortunately, this woman didn't know Geoff. She just knew of him, and she had no idea where he lived or where the parents lived. And I just wanted to express my sympathies more than anything. I wasn't looking, for anything. So that was it.
Gotcha. Well, here's one question I have. I mean, and it states, I'm sitting here just reading some information right now. It says 4 divorces, 5 marriages between the two of you. Right. But you guys make the greatest relationship coaches because there hasn't, or it would be rare for there to be a specific situation that you haven't gone through.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, this is something. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
Just to put things in perspective, last in May, we had my first ex-husband come to Sarasota. He was driving our daughter back home. She was going to move back to Milwaukee, and she was having a tough time balancing the end of her work career here in Florida. And so he said, "Don't worry about it. We'll pick him up at the airport." We played golf with him. We had dinner with him. We had lunch with him. We had a great time, and we are very friendly. And that was something that I started when they were young, because they were 6 and 8 when we divorced, and it was always the graduation, important events. Any kind of celebration, birthdays, we always included the ex-family. And this is something that in our coaching practice, we discover a lot, because a lot of people have trouble with that, of the letting go and not letting the anger, seep into the relationship for the kids. So for us, it's always about the kids. What's the best interest of the kids? That's the primary focus that we do. And then we did the same thing with my second ex-husband when our daughter graduated. We sat with them, we had dinners and lunches, and everybody was on their best behavior. And it's just we just sort of set that premise that it's the focus is only for the child, and
right.
Yeah, but
things work out.
Ted, your point's very well taken, though. We feel we've experienced so many things, and even like what I mentioned with what happened with my brother. Anybody we're talking to in coaching, they can bring up almost any topic, and we can understand, relate, and help them through it because we've experienced so many of these things. And a lot of what we do in the relationship coaching is coaching people through divorce processes. Often that's what we're called upon to do. People are realizing a relationship is broken, and they're looking at this very scary world potentially of divorce. And if there's children involved, it gets, of course, so much more complicated. And we try very hard to guide them through and give them a steady hand and let them see that they can make it through and that they can be friends, down the road with the ex and do the very best things for the children, because that's, as we all know, is our singular focus as parents.
And by the way, in our book, we do not talk about exes. We don't ever denigrate them or speak badly of them. They are the parent of our children and are respected and honored. And so I can openly say, because we say it in our book, that I know exactly why I got divorced both times, and I just didn't like who I had become. And it has nothing to do with blaming other people, which is, I think what we'll get to later is that the blaming stuff really is kind of a thing that makes my blood boil.
Yeah, in fact, Ed, when we first got back together again and we're talking on the phone, one of the first things we both said is that we were both shocked that we're both twice divorced, because we're both big believers in marriage. We think we're not ones who say, oh, marriage is terrible. We've thought it's a wonderful institution. We're huge believers in it. And that's one of the reasons why it's worked so well for us now.
That is really awesome. I do have one question about the blended family. Has there ever been a time where, let's say, you've mentioned earlier, and initially this goes for Poppy, and Geoff, you can follow up with your response, where whether it's Father's Day or it's Mother's Day or there's some type of holiday where the entire family gets together. Let's just say if it's if you're doing something for daughter number one or daughter number two, and both of the exes are present at the same time, and or vice versa for you, Geoff.
Oh, is it uncomfortable for Geoff? Is that what you're asking? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
No. Again, one of the things that part of it, I think, Ted, is too because of where we're at now, because it's so good and it's so secure and it's so strong, and the kids all see that, and they're so happy with it. Both my son and then the other four, everybody's gotten along so well that no, it hasn't been uncomfortable. We don't shy from it. We don't. In fact, in many cases, we all get a good laugh about it when we see opportunities to kind of make fun of ourselves, and so no, it hasn't been. It hasn't been uncomfortable. Excuse me, for us or our children.
I think what it's also one of the things, and that's why we became relationship coaches, is because we put our we got our own heads together and our hearts together, and we became one voice, and we understood all of the nuances and how important it is to communicate with each other, and absolutely we're on the same page with parenting, even though our kids are just tiptoed into adulthood. When we got together, they were still teens, but definitely the unified voice, I would say, is the number one reason why we felt we were successful with the blended family.
Gotcha. That's so important.
It's
you guys
a critical aspect of parenting, and unfortunately, in so many cases, you've probably seen this, Ted, where one parent undermines the other.
Yes.
That can be so bad for all parties. It makes any things with discipline and consistency almost impossible to maintain.
And sometimes they do it unwittingly. They're unconsciously undermining, and they don't know it. And, back in Wisconsin when I lived there, I used to teach parenting classes, and and my kids were younger, and worked through. I even facilitated a group called like Rainbow Kids, I think is what it was, in churches and schools to help children work through divorce or loss of a parent through death, and try to understand that. So it's been my focus for about, family is number one. It's like I always tease that somebody can mess with me and I'll probably let it go, but don't mess with one of my 4 kids.
Hey, so, and the important thing, Poppy, you said, don't mess with one of my, with one of my 4 kids, because, as a parent, no matter how old they are, and this is something I tell my daughter, because she just turned, she's going to be 15 this December, and I keep telling her, you're getting up there, but you're still my little girl. And
right.
They don't understand it, I guess, until when they're parents. I guess I have a question on that either of you guys can answer on useful advice on removing the stigma of divorce, because divorce is just seen as evil, as being failures, as being just quitters. For those that have that closely follow the faith. They are told, you're not to be divorced, but it gets to a point, the divorce rate, with it being so high, how can we remove the stigma of divorce?
Well, and we're faith-based people. We belong to a church. There are some churches that probably wouldn't allow us to enter being divorced. I think it's. I think one of our gifts is that we're very comfortable and open about it. One of the words we use throughout our book is vulnerability. We're very comfortable being vulnerable and saying, "Hey, it is what it is." I think the acceptance of it and not looking at it as a stigma is a first step.
It's also changed a lot over time. We've noticed this with seeing young families go through divorce. The children aren't as stunned, Ted, by it. They see other kids deal with this, and so they say, "Oh, it's like Tommy's parents." Okay, I understand. And so we always try to, and whenever we're talking to anyone, and someone's looking for advice, a single person's considering getting back into finding a love, and they're like, "Well, gosh, I'm divorced," and Poppy and I often, we'll kind of have fun at our own expense. We'll gasp and go, "Oh my gosh, you're divorced, really?" And we're quick to say, well, we're twice divorced, and
I certainly had the stigma when I was first divorced, though I have to say it, because I had 2 kids, and I had a hard time with it as a single mom because none of my friends were single, none of them. And that was like in the dark ages. But anyway, I just my focus was my kids all the time. And so I think that's what we encourage these parents to do, is just to make it about the kids and explain to them if they have questions, and they might say something like, Mommy and Daddy don't agree on certain things, and the kids may or may not have been witness to that. And they say, yeah, I understand, and say, so we're going to be, I think, better parents if not living together. So it'll be better for you. And a lot of these kids today will say, I get my own room at Dad's house, or I get I get to keep my room at Mom's house, or whatever.
And I think one of the things that we also we have debated with many of folks, that they say, oh, you should always always stay together for the kids, and we'll challenge that thought. That we'll say, okay, so if people are in just a terrible marriage where they're just always fighting and just completely dysfunctional for whatever reasons, alcoholism, other abusive things that can take place in marriages, we're very quick to say, gosh, no, we think it's way better, for the sake of the kids, to not let them be exposed to that. Go ahead and get the divorce if it is dysfunctional, if it's broken, if it's just an angry environment, that is not a healthy environment for a child to grow up in. And so we think it's better to divorce for the sake of the kids.
Especially if there's denial around substance abuse or other things on the part of if a parent is willing to work through that and they go, hey, I've got a lot at stake here. I don't want this family to be broken up. We are absolutely 100% in support of that. If they're going to go, you know what, I'm going to get my act together. I'm going to go to rehab if I need to.
Great.
Oh, absolutely, we'll support that and say, good for you. And then we'd help them, mend the pieces that are doing that. But it has to be a willingness on both sides,
I want to stay with this topic for a second.
Sure.
Because I want you guys to help our listeners out, because they might be in a situation like this. Anyone that's listening to the show now, could you give us a best practice on exiting a toxic relationship?
Well, I think that one of the things that
call us. I would probably, if they want to exit, they've made up their mind they want to exit, I would say they should probably contact a lawyer.
Okay.
If they're absolutely sure the marriage is irrevocably broken, and if there's abuse in the home and the children are present, we advise people to take the kids and try and leave.
But I'd only back up to one thing, Ted, and it's one of the things that we've developed and trademarked as a part of our book. If the communication hasn't taken place, they might be one of the parties might be thinking all these things and as predetermined in their own mind what they believe is happening in the marriage, but they really haven't opened up and said it and discussed it in a very serious fashion. It's of course critical to do that, and people often don't want to really bring these things up because it's a terrifying thing to do.
Right.
You're hitting. In fact, we have this tool called the emotional clock, and it goes through all the emotions we deal with and having to make an emotional decision. And I always just point people towards that 6 o'clock mark. 6 o'clock is this kind of making that hard decision where you have to say, am I going to face this demon, whatever this is, and bring it up, and either, which it might be repairing the relationship, or it'll be ending it if they feel that there's no resolution. But often that 6 o'clock wall is a very scary wall to hit. And
we call it fight or flight.
That's that moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to do something. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but and you have to discuss it. It has to all get out, and it might come out that there isn't any reparation to be done, that it is broken, but you might be surprised and discover that you haven't talked about these things. That's typically one of the biggest barriers is always communication, and this whole emotional clock is a tool to be used to help you communicate, and it's something it's described in the book. It's one of the tools that our friend Jesse uses in his work, is what I like to say.
I say her, he says his. But even if and there might even be listeners out there who was like, well, I don't even know how to broach the subject with my spouse,
right,
or my significant other, or whatever. Maybe consider going to a therapist or a counselor or a coach, whatever the person's comfortable with, and discussing it with someone first. We do a lot of role-playing scenarios so that people feel comfortable when they actually have to have that hard discussion to be able to
because often we'll have just a singular party. A wife contacts us and says, "Here's where I am in my relationship, and I'm not sure where to go here," and we'll guide them in ways to discuss as much as they can. And we've had things go both ways, Ted, where people say they are able to bring it out, and they are able to get things repaired and get help from someone if they need help, and then others that they come to the conclusion, no, it is broken, and we help guide them through and take them through the steps to make it as smooth and as painless as is possible.
And as coaches, I just wanted to interject here a little bit that we never advise or tell people what they should do. We listen. We liken our role as an architect to help people build goals and to obtain those results that they've chosen for themselves. Where a therapist is more like an archaeologist. They more kind of like dig up stuff and look at the past and look at the behaviors, but they're not as goal oriented as we are. So we usually like to get people to make a decision. Either you're going to stay in the relationship or you're going to exit it.
We're speaking with Geoff and Poppy Spencer, co-authors of the book 1BillionSeconds, a fictional memoir. My question is going to be on the services that you provide, the relationship coaching services that you provide. How do you provide them? Because you guys are in Sarasota. Are you doing it over the phone? Are you doing a video teleconference? Are you doing it, through what method? How are you guys providing this?
Yes, and yes. Whatever the most, we've had local folks that we've done in-person meetings with. We have many clients where we'll have Skype as the protocol we were using for video conference, and do that with many folks. Often it's just phone calls is often one of the most flexible things, so someone can do that. Say as they're driving to work or anything else, you can talk no matter where you are, or if you need moments of privacy, often that's the case too. They'll just can walk around with a cell phone or drive somewhere and have a private conversation. So whatever works for the client, that is what we use.
My next question is...
We have clients that we've never even met, of course, through referrals and whatever. And it works for us because we're on Eastern time.
Yes.
If we have somebody who's on Mountain Time, for instance, we can schedule a call at night, and it's not, too disruptive.
My next question is it primarily couples, or is it just the significant other, or is it just kind of, however it's just delivered to you guys?
Basically, which you just the last point. However it's delivered, it's often a singular spouse will start the process. In fact,
we've had both.
Yeah, we've had both. By any chance, have you ever seen the movie Hope Springs?
I have not.
Okay, interesting movie with Meryl Streep and Tommy Lee Jones. Kind of a discussion of a marriage that's gotten old and very stale, and Meryl Streep plays this very disempowered wife, which is amazing in itself that she plays that.
I know.
She's incredible. But she goes to a counselor, and Tommy Lee Jones goes kicking and screaming to the counselor. He wants nothing to do with it, and thinks everything's just fine. And she says, "Well, it's not fine. It's I don't like where it is." And the counselor, Steve Carell, plays the counselor. And kind of comes to a point at one point where he's talking to the husband. He says, people come to me for one of two reasons: is to either fix the relationship or end it. And he says, which one's it going to be for you? So that's sort of the concept of what we often have to try to do with people. And it's one of the spouses is saying, I want to do something about it, and the other might be just trying to avoid it and not deal with it, but they have to, because one of the parties is saying we have to do something. I'm not going to let it stay the way it is.
I want to bring up a couple of things. I'll start here. Geoff, you lost your brother in 9/11. As you mentioned earlier, it's never easy. I mean, having a sibling there and no longer being able to speak with that sibling or interact with that sibling, but overcoming the tragedy and keeping that loved one's memory. How did you do it?
Well, a great question, one that I love to talk about. When the event happened, Ted, we were all stunned. We were all shocked, and I'm watching this take place as we all were, And when I saw that second tower, that south tower, which was the first to crumble, if you remember,
yes,
he was in there, and I watched that, and I realized I probably lost him. And first of all, I was very fortunate. You mentioned a word earlier on, faith. I had been very active in the church that I lived in Davidson at the time, Davidson United Methodist, active in the choir. I was actually a chaplain in the choir, doing prayers and things. So I was very fortunate. I had a great basis in faith that I've always described to people. I felt like I had a mattress waiting for me when I got hit by this truck, that I
yes.
fell and I didn't hit the ground. I hit a mattress. And I was okay. I was able to get back up again. And one of the things that happened, it happened on a Tuesday. On a Thursday, I made a decision to drive down and be with my parents because they were down in Florida, and I was in the Carolinas again. And so I drove down and was with them. But as I got into the car, I received a phone call as I was driving down from a lady who was a reporter with the Charlotte Observer, and now they're a mutual friend and put us together, and this person said that I'd probably be open and willing to talk about it. And when she asked me the question, she said, "I'm sorry about what happened. Are you okay talking about this?" Well, at that moment, I felt the best way I can describe it, Ted, is like a presence around me saying, this is what you're supposed to be doing now. You tell the story of your brother's life and the great love you shared.
Yes, sir.
And that's your job right now. And I answered to this reporter, Elizabeth Leland. I said, Elizabeth, I am absolutely okay talking about this. And I had a mantra from that moment on, Ted, that this tragedy was not going to be the way my brother's story's life ended. I was going to make sure that it was told in a very different way, and I was between that article and I spoke at churches, and I talked about great love for family and about the great adventures we had shared. We did a lot of sailing together, Ted. We raced a small sailboat, 19-footer called a Flying Scot that we grew up with, and competed all over the country with it, and had great success with it, and so I told of those great adventures that we'd shared, and I did actually make a decision to. I was actually on NPR radio at one point too, being interviewed about this, and so I made a big point of hitting it head on, not being just sitting around and feeling badly. I was going to put every bit of energy I had into making something good out of it. And right after this happened, the sailboat that I had that I shared and sail with my brother regularly, I made a decision to sell it, Ted, only because it reminded me that he wasn't there.
Right.
I couldn't do it anymore. I just was there was a hole in the boat there where he was supposed to be. And I walked away from this lifelong sport that I'd shared with my father and my brother, and we'd had our same version of this boat, a very old version of this boat, and my brother had taken up to his home in Connecticut. And he was in the process of fixing it up a little bit when 9/11 happened, and the boat got abandoned in his backyard. And after a year, I made a decision after a Thanksgiving meal with my family to go up and get that old boat. And I brought it back to the Carolinas, and I decided to finish the job that he started. And I had this wonderful cathartic journey to take this boat, which any smart guy would have taken to the dump, Ted. It was a wreck. It had water and sewage sitting in it because it got abandoned in a field, basically. And I totally repaired it, rebuilt it, got it back to almost brand new, and that became a great healing thing. And in fact, there was a wonderful article in the Charlotte Observer that the same reporter did, kind of the happy ending to the story. So, I was able to find a great pathway when this took place in my life, Ted, to put my energy towards something. And, again, the mantra I kept on having, this is not going to be the way his life story is going to end. So I would suggest to anybody who faces these kind of things to try to find some way, some place to put that angst and somehow honor that person. My high school in Cleveland, our high school, does a lecture series that honors him, and I go and speak every year at that and introduce a guest speaker. So, any way you can to positively spin this and make it a happy ending, I try to do that, and as you can tell by what I'm telling you now, continue to do it.
Yes.
And one of the things that he told his son, who was like 11 or 12 or something at the time, on the way to school the next day.
Yeah, I remember this just came to me as I was driving him. I said, Jonathan, I know you've just seen the very worst of what mankind can do, but I said, pay close attention from this point on. If you watch very carefully, you'll see the very best of what mankind can do. And that's one of the great things we all get to witness. We live in Sarasota, but we were over in the Orlando area when this terrible attack took place at the nightclub.
My. Yes.
And you watched those kind of things hit me as well, because when you're watching all the families trying to find out what happened to their loved ones. Is my loved one in the hospital? Is my loved one deceased? Well, all these people that are just having this horrible pain of trying to figure out what happened to your loved one. And I felt that so personally. But all of us were feeling that pain, and it was wonderful to look at the news and see people lined up around the block to give blood for the hospital.
Totally.
And we did the same thing. We went over to our local Sarasota blood bank, which had been depleted, by the way. They shipped all the blood to Orlando from here.
Oh, my.
And so we went in there, and the place was jammed. It was jammed, and people just were all, couldn't wait to step up to the plate and do something to give their own blood to help these total strangers, because there's so much good in people that if you just give them the opportunity, they'll rally and they'll do good things.
I was just as happy to see. I mean, as sad as I was at the time when that happened at the Pulse nightclub, I was down in Virginia, Prince George, Virginia, celebrating my nephew's graduation, high school graduation, and he went into the military yesterday. I that night, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at CNN and I'm looking at Fox. I'm flipping back and forth, and they're talking about, everything that was going on. But at the same time, for once, just this one time, they did talk about the people that were jammed in the streets, waiting online to give blood. And I said, for once, there's some light in all the darkness within that specific story.
I was just going to add that when we like to call the coming together of people as one unified, compassionate voice, the 9/11 effect, because that is what happened after 9/11.
Yes.
That politics, gender, the economy, it became irrelevant, and we had one collective grieving where nobody pointed fingers, nobody did anything. We just gave a huge collective hug, a world hug, and even in grief we became one, and I just think that's so important. I know even today people talk about Geoff and the boat, the symbol that the boat represented, and how they all, it's like it's getting repetitive hugs every time we talk about that story.
Yes.
As you can tell, I always love when anybody asks the question, because I get to tell the story all over again, and it's
of course,
it's still rewarding to me to be able to, that I don't have to sit there and say it was tragic, it was horrible. It was, of course, but I made sure that the story ended in a far better way that I can. And it was so exciting to me, Ted, too, when I was able to see people's faces change, and get excited by me telling the story, and they're like, "Wow, that's so great that you were able to do that." And I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Yes,
that's
awesome. That is really awesome, Poppy. I need your help.
Okay.
I really do. I hope you're prepared for this, because I mean, we've been on the phone. We're the best of friends now, the three of us. Okay.
Yes, we are.
So I need you here's where I need your help. I need you to offer a mindset to help those, like myself, rid themselves of any thoughts or feelings or behaviors preventing us from being the best version of ourselves. How would I do that when I just have so much negativity around me? It's I have to commute 3 hours a day, round trip to work. I said at the start of the show, and I told you, an information technology person, so a lot of times people are coming to me with unique type problems that only I can answer. And it's very stressful. And then I get home, or when I get to work and I'm dealing with issues, my wife will call me up, Ted, what time are you coming home? And I'm like, do you have any idea? It took me 90 minutes to get here, and I have 3 people by my front door looking for an answer. And what do you mean our son bullied somebody today? And how do I need you to help me to be the best version of myself.
Well, first of all, I think that's great, and thank you for saying that. I can't even imagine you having a bunch of negativity that you carry around, because you just don't seem that kind of person. So I think you're already doing a pretty good job about being the best version of yourself, Ted. When I think about that, yes, we are surrounded by negativity. I think about 15 years ago, I started really looking into, and from psychology too, and positive psychology. I was a charter member of the International Positive Psychology Association, and that wasn't the coolest thing in the world. I went to that conference.
Hang out with those people for a while, Ted. You always feel better.
Yes, that was like the best thing. And as a psychology professor, that was one of the units that we taught was on positive psychology, and it usually starts with gratitude. But I always like to say, and kind of law of attraction, you attract that which you think or feel. So if you're thinking negative thoughts, you're probably going to have an extra dose of negativity come your way. But I always like to say to someone when they're really upset about something, I'll say, okay, in this moment, do you want to feel good or do you want to be right? Because oftentimes our ego, countermands everything and wants us to be right. And so, and then I get a few comics that will say, I want to be right and I want to feel good. But it's usually you want to be. Usually, I like to encourage people to want to feel good. And all you need to do is look in the news, and you hear someone complain about something that seems pretty insignificant, and then you learn of something tragic or horrific that happens, and that pretty much slips away, right? So the traffic commute doesn't compare to what happened in Orlando, right?
Right.
And
correct.
You can always make the best of the time too. If the drive is long and it's stressful, and you can use that time very effectively. We often listen to. We have a CD collection about the person who created the law of attraction. And just it does a great job of just constantly reframing, and that's another one of the words that we always love to use. Reframing things and putting them in a better positive light, and it always also any of the things you're talking about, your son being bullied, whatever the things are, all of this has dealt with communication, and that tool we talked about before. Our emotional clock helps people stop and say, well, here's where I am right now, and this is what I'm feeling, and just it gives you a chance to talk and communicate with typically your spouse, or if it is the child, whatever it is. Communication and the courage to do it. You always have to be able to say, I'm not going to just sit here and stew. I'm going to calm myself and be vulnerable, open up, be willing to talk about it, be willing to share, and be willing to listen.
Ted, can we ask how long you've been married?
I have been married this year, coming up November 8th, will be year number 18.
Wonderful.
Good for you.
So I think, in hindsight, being 2020, we've been given a gift. There isn't a day. We've been together now 6 years, married 5. There isn't a day that goes by where I love yous haven't been exchanged multiple times. And probably not a night that we don't go to bed without tears at the corners of our eyes, saying we feel so blessed and grateful. We really feel like we've been given a gift, and even in hard times. I mean, we have challenging times. We our kids, even though they're adults, they're over 18.
You never stop being a parent.
Never stop being a parent.
No, never.
And
never.
there are tough times, and certainly through that, I want to poke fun at myself. There was a time not too long ago where I was fuming about something and just venting, and Geoff had this look in his face, which I've come to recognize as, I think I'm just not going to say anything. I'm just going to let her go on here. And he just smiled, and I said, I know you're thinking I need to just, let it go and feel good about, reach for the next best feeling or thought here. But I just want to vent for like another 10 minutes, and then I promise I'll come back. So it made me laugh to say that, and it really took the sting out of whatever was bugging me.
And I know, Ted, you've seen that, many things, men are from Mars, women are from Venus kind of stuff, where how different men and women are. And it's true.
Totally.
And men always want to dive in and solve. We're great fixers, where we love to repair things and fix things and solve things. And
yes, we are.
It's so important, to not do that in a discussion with your wife. Many times it's just a matter of them just getting things out and just sharing, and there's a lot of nodding and listening and accepting, and there isn't anything you typically need to often say, but just be a good listener.
And I have one more thing that it just came to me, Ted, because you asked me. You said your wife said to you, "What time will you be getting home?" Oftentimes, and I don't know if I speak for all women, but many of them, I think, that's really a question that she doesn't really want to know. The question is, I need to connect with you at this point, or when is the time that I'm going to be able to connect with you? She doesn't really care about the hour that you're going to get home. I think she cares about when are you going to have time to talk with maybe just me. And we used to do that when we were still living separately in different states, and we would say, I just need a time. We have a chapter in the book about that too. We have when can we arrange a time that I will have undevoted focus just for you, even if it's 10 minutes. So,
and we also say things like, don't fill in the blanks too. One of this chapter Poppy's referring to, I was returning from a very long, very lousy business trip.
Probably like Ted's day.
Yeah, kind of like what you're describing, Ted, where I'm just, I'm just snarling, and exhausted, and I've multiple plane rides and multiple, everything that just makes it long and miserable, and you get home and Poppy just meets me again at the airport, and she's bouncing up and down with her soulmate sign, and I'm like, and she's wondering why I'm not just as joyous as she is.
Yeah, we were engaged. We were engaged to be married.
And it took me a while. We got home, and I unpack, and I'm still...
No, he was all lovey-dovey with the pets. The pets got all this cooing and everything else, and I had nothing, no kiss, no nothing.
And we quickly discovered it was just me needing to just get out of that mindset of traveling and everything else, and decelerating for a moment, and that's where you talk about that long drive and long day. You have to.
It's a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, the drive is often a good way to, if you can, if it's not too stressful, to decelerate. But then when I got home, I was able to say, I'm sorry, there's nothing wrong between us. I just need a moment to clear my head here, and I'm thrilled to be with you, sweetheart, and it's great. But she was reading all these things into my behavior that I didn't really care for her anymore. That
the wedding was off, the engagement was off.
She was filling. That's why we say don't fill in the blanks. Don't if you're thinking something, share with me, because that's not what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking any of those things. I'm just tired. That's all.
But
goodness!
But it was also understanding him enough to know that he did need that debrief time, to unwind, and I had to wait until he was ready to approach it and go, okay, I've had 45 minutes here, and I've gone through my mail or whatever, and of course I'm thinking, why do you need to go through your mail? I haven't seen you in a week. That
was an important deceleration phase for me.
Yeah. So it's just my understanding of that. It was like, oh, okay, this is a detached way I can look at that and say that this is his process. So I think your drive, your commute, is a wonderful opportunity You can have some, when I was an art therapist, I used to use mindfulness, guided imagery to help people get to those good feeling places. And so it's a wonderful time for you to go through a grateful list in your head about how blessed you are. And, with your son who was accused or whatnot of bullying, that's just a cry for, I feel insecure about something. Usually when somebody is a bully, I'm insecure. Okay, so as a parent, my first question is, okay, so what can I do as dad or mom or both to give my son the reassurance that he's going to be okay, that it's normal to be a teenager and have these transitional thoughts and these insecurities, and there's better ways to manage those through your behavior. Talking about it is better. So maybe it's time for, it's taking the time with you and your wife to sit with him and go, hey, let's just chill here, and let's, what can we talk about? Well, you decide. My ex-husband would say to me, do we have to have these family meetings? And I'm like, yep, we sure do. Yep.
Hey, Geoff and Poppy, we want to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and then we'll wrap up. But I just want to play, there's 4 sponsors I want to play really quick.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
I am loving my Verizon FiOS. In fact, I recently joked that if we move, we have to find a place with FiOS coverage. To my surprise, our family actually agreed. Not only is FiOS the fastest internet service, it also has never been down, with the exception of when Storm Sandy hit us. And indeed, only FiOS gives you the same speed uploading for your files, photos, etc., as it does downloading, as in HD movies. Cable cannot offer you this, only FiOS. So go ahead, make a very smart choice with Verizon FiOS.
Your choice and a free 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/late-night-parents and choose from over 180,000 audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/late-night-parents. That's audibletrial.com/late-night-parents and get started today. Why Audible? Audible content includes more than 180,000 audio programs from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers, and business information providers.
Are you looking for some sick sports apparel? DHTK designed some of the newest and coolest brands such as Represent, Game Over, and Don't Hate the King. DHTK's vision is to integrate culture, fashion, and attitude that best represents the players and caters to us, the fans. Click on DHTK.com and subscribe to their mailing list for an automatic 10% off your order. If you are a basketball fan, follow DHTK on social media. Visit DHTK.com for more details. DHTK.com. You don't have to be a king to dress like one.
Try listening to the Happy Hour Network on Blog Talk Radio. The Happy Hour Network features live shows such as Late Night Parents with Ted Hicks, Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue with Ted, Todd Vandenberg, and Lee Vowell, The Seahawks Show with Kevin Daggett, and NBA Full Court Press with Danny Thompson. You can also catch podcasts like The SWAT Show, The Earnestly Speaking Podcast, Cinema Savants, and The Tennis Scene, found at blogtalkradio.com/Happy Hour Network. The Happy Hour Network, radio worth listening to.
Host of Late Night Parents. We call it L&P Live. On Saturdays at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, we speak with game changers in the world of sports, technology, education, and product reviews. Why, you ask? Because parents do matter. Saturday, 4:30 p.m., Late Night Parents. We're live and exclusively on 1240 a.m. WGBB. And this is Ted Hicks, Late Night Parents. And yes, parents do matter. Tonight, our episode is called If Then Else. We have none other than, for the last hour or so, you've been hearing Poppy and Geoff Spencer, co-authors of the new book, 1BillionSeconds, a fictional memoir. It's been really exciting, and it's really been a great, fun, very loose conversation, because I got to tell you, a lot of times, Geoff and Poppy, the people are either tight or they can't carry the conversation, and I kind of step in and say, okay, I'm going to have to carry this conversation, but I haven't had to. I've been blessed tonight to just listen to your sage advice that both of you guys have been able to give me on, and our listeners, on relationship and love and caring and dealing with spouses and, all the above, blended families, which is so, so important. I mean, I just love talking about that specific topic, because I don't want to say it's a taboo, but it's kind of like, okay, a lot of folks are interested in the conventional family, but a lot of times, when two people meet, and it might be, a man and a woman, or it might be a man and a man, or a woman and a woman meet, they have prior relations or prior relationships, and, children have been spawned out of those relationships, and you get to that point of the blended family. So it's so good to be able to talk to a couple that's, I'm going to say the word seasoned, and I don't want you to, say, oh my goodness.
You mean old?
Person. I'll tell you guys this much. I'm 45, so I'm feeling a little bit old nowadays when I'm trying to get up in the morning. I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to do this commute again. But I tell you with that, we talked about the very best of mankind, because we talked about Orlando, what we saw with the tragedy there at the Club. But then you saw something else, and you guys talked about it also at 9/11. Where we saw it wasn't Democrats, Republicans, Independents. They were just people just joining together to make sure everyone was okay. Now I have to move to pointing fingers or not pointing fingers, playing the blame game, because that happens a lot in my household with my 14-year-old daughter and my 9-year-old son. I guess that's expected, but it's something when it happens amongst adults. And I'm sure in your world as relationship coaches, you see that very often. So I would like for you to share, some of your experiences or best practices that you can provide with how not to play the blame game, how not to point fingers at each other, all the above.
Well, we just thank you, Ted. And it's great to be on your show. You're so easy to speak with, so it's great for us too. Thank you. We just finished an article that we were visiting with family in the Chicago suburbs, and one of our daughter's very dear friends lost her little girl on Father's Day in a drowning accident, 4-year-old girl. And so we just wrote this article, at the intersection of shame and blame, there's still a hole. Please fill it with empathy. We were just so shocked at the outpouring of love, yes, but of also the judgment that came towards these parents who were at the pool. 2 lifeguards were also right there. It wasn't that crowded. It just happened in the blink of an eye. And we didn't understand that. There didn't used to be that kind of parent shaming and blaming. And so it got us to thinking, I put on my psychology hat and I was like, okay, so what is it behind this human need that we have to blame and do that? And we couldn't understand. It's like this child was our child. I don't know if you remember back in 1987, there was this little girl that fell into a well, and she was called Baby Jessica.
Yes.
It might have been before your time, but
it was like this 6-inch wide pipe that she fell down, which is hard to even believe she did. Remember that?
I believe so.
Yeah. Anyway, it was covered like nonstop on the news, and everybody was collectively held their breath and praying for that. There wasn't one comment about where were those parents when the baby was in the yard.
How'd they let this happen?
Right.
Nobody did any of that. And it's like, how did we get away from this that suddenly? So unfortunately,
Poppy,
yeah.
I have to break in for a second because only because at what point did we get to this point? How did we get to this point?
Right.
How did we get to this point where someone, a child is in a zoo or a child is at Disney World and these tragedies happen and all of a sudden the blame game starts.
Right.
And Facebook is just on fire and social media is just looking at the parents as being negligent. I mean, I felt so horrible for the parents. I mean, yes, I did feel bad for Harambe. I did, okay? But I felt bad for the parents, and I felt bad for the children that were in harm's way. I'm sorry, I just had to interject there.
Of course, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, a few days ago we had this freak accident here in Sarasota at our local gun range. This faith-based family father took his 3 kids to the gun range, and as he's firing the gun, one of the shell casings landed in his shirt, and it was burning, right?
Oh.
So he took his right hand, with the gun in it. Unfortunately, he didn't put it down because it was a reflexive action that it was burning him, and he poked his fingers into his shirt, and the gun triggered and hit the wall, and then landed behind him where his 14-year-old son stood, and it ricocheted off the ceiling
and killed the young man
and killed his son.
Oh man, yes.
And so it's just like it's just it's rocked our community here. This is a horrible, tragic thing, and so many people on social media are pointing fingers and everything else, and so that's why we wanted to find out what happened. And I think and a lot of times it's moms, but it's dads too. I mean, I even knew that as a mom of 4 kids that mothers are quick to blame and judge, and I don't know why that is, but they do. It's a woman blogger, writer named Rihanna Maidenberg. She wrote an article about why we judge, and she said, a lot of times we put ourselves in that position and we say, well, it could have been any one of us.
True.
We judge the family, so we make the situation less painful to bear, so we can distance ourselves from this kind of heartbreak. And I think that is in the core of it, in our human defense mechanisms. I think that's the core of why people shame and blame.
It protects our ego.
Yes.
Because it could be us. When I was a parent in teaching kids to my all of them to be potty trained or to sleep through the night or whatever, I didn't listen. I didn't follow the rules. I was I would be absolutely judged when it was potty training time and you were close to 3 years old. I sat outside the bathroom door with a little bowl of M&Ms. For every tinkle came an M&M. Okay,
right.
That is absolutely the wrong way to do it. I'm sure I would have been branded and everything else. I think my kids are okay now. They're all potty trained.
Yes, they are. I bet you they are.
They're okay. I don't think. But at the time, I didn't share that with a soul because I knew it would be, it's not the way it's supposed to be.
I guess sometimes people also just wrestle with how to show and how to show empathy. And this is one of the things that it was nice when we were with our daughter recently in Chicago when this tragedy took place. When this was this young girl the 4-year-old was a playmate of our granddaughters, and so they were all wrestling with what do we do? How do we And I said, well, as someone who's experienced this firsthand, to be the center of a community's grief, because when 9/11 happened. It happened far away. I mean, unless you were in the New York metropolitan areas, it was far away from all of us,
Yes.
So in my community in the Charlotte area, and my parents' community down towards Orlando, we were the center of focus. People wanted to be able to express what they had, and they came to us, with the doorbell was ringing regularly, people coming to the door. They didn't know what to say necessarily or do, but I always tell people is that whenever these things happen, just show up, Go to the homes of these people. Be there for them. There's nothing you're going to be able to say or do. It's going to make it better. Showing up is what makes it better. Be there for them, just to talk. It's some piece of normalcy.
And sometimes not even talk. Just stay there with wordless tears streaming down your face.
Long hugs and lots of tears, Mike. That's all that takes place. But you have to just be. Being alone is often the far worst thing. You want to be surrounded by friends and family. And I remember opening the door so many times and seeing these blank stares from friends and neighbors, and I'd just say, I know you don't know what to say. Just come on in. Thank you for coming, and accept the food offering, whatever they brought. And it was this is probably the very best of mankind things, Ted. That was, we all have the capacity for that, and it's so much better to reach for that than it is to reach for blames and shames, because these people have already, like any of these people we've talked about, the poor families at Disney with the alligator and taking the child, the Nebraska family, these people are just tortured to no end.
Yes.
Yeah, and why would saying anything more doesn't do anything for anybody? Does that make you feel better by condemning these poor people? I mean, come on, we're better than that.
But I think that's what it is. It is part of our human nature to do that, and I say that as a general statement. From a psychological standpoint, if we're trying to get some objective, rationale for why we do this, it's well, don't they know that they must be neglectful parents? It's like, no,
right.
Right. It's so not right. So, and especially with this current thing now, it's opened up a whole onslaught of. This is why we need gun reform, and and it's like, oh my gosh, it's just it doesn't have relevance to grief at this point. And,
no, it doesn't.
So social media, one of the courses I used to teach was called Psychology of Social Interaction, and it was how we communicate face to face and virtually. And how we communicate today virtually is we call them like keyboard blamers. Yes. I don't think these people would say things to your face if they saw you. They wouldn't say, you shouldn't be so neglectful. You should have been watching. You should have not have guns.
As they're sobbing over the casket of this young child, you're not going to say it then.
Right. You're right.
And if you especially if you could say to someone, have you ever been to a child's funeral? It's brutal. It's horrendous,
Poppy, I've got to jump in here and say I've never been to one, and I never want to go to one.
Mm-mm. Of course.
Oh.
So
Truthfully.
Anyway, so I think what I don't know what the answer is. I can't be the we can't be the ones to say that. Only that we can just keep beating the drum of empathy and compassion and love and
part of it is not engaging too, Ted. Don't read them. Don't react to them. Don't give them the audience. That's unfortunately the world of media we have gives the audience and to just about anybody who wants to have a voice can be given a platform.
Right.
And so just keep surrounding them with more love. I mean, I don't. Any of these tragic things could have been our kids, as parents,
I just want to briefly tell the story of. So I was at Van Heusen, and it's on Long Island in Carl Place. So what happened was I took my son, and I think at the time he was maybe 4, maybe 3 or 4. And he was still, pretty goofy. So we're in the store, and I'm going through the shirts and looking at the polos, and I blink my eyes, and I don't see him.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell this story because almost a similar story happened with my daughter and Foot Locker, where he went under the aisle. He went under a clothes rack.
Sure.
I lost my mind. I told Geoff, Poppy, I lost my mind, and started screaming code red, ready for everyone to lock the store down. And then I saw my son, snickering under there. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I can only imagine how some of those parents, because they don't have a good story like we have, a good ending.
Right.
Where we're like, where you pull your son or your daughter to the side and say, hey, you can't do this because this is the reason why you shouldn't do this. Where, it's the other story, and it's very hurtful. And I just, every day, I do go on social media primarily for the podcast and for the radio show. I go on there and I check some of the comments. And other than that, I'll post something on Twitter, something that's informational or something that's going to be helpful. But as for burning someone or ripping someone for being a terrible parent, nah, no thanks.
No, we agree.
It's not it.
I don't know. When we grew up, I mean, we just grew up in a different era where we didn't have organized sports or athletics. We just went on the street and played, and everybody was in a big group, and everybody's mother's neighbor knew exactly where I was and where I should be, and you need to go home. And
everybody knew everybody too.
Everybody on the block was accountable.
Yes.
And all on the same page. They had one neighborhood voice, and so parents are diversified now, and they have different values and different belief systems. So I think that also comes into play here too.
Poppy, I and Geoff, I don't want to sound like I said, I don't want to sound like the person from old school, the old fogey. But yes, I remember being on the block and growing up in Queens, and everyone on the block was your mother.
Yes,
and everyone could tell you, hey, Ted, what are you doing right now? You shouldn't be doing that because, hey, I have your mother's phone number. You know what? I'm going to call her and let her know.
Yeah.
And that worked. That worked, where nowadays you have, I look at certain situations where the person's like, well, that's not my child. Oh, all I care about is my child.
Yeah.
When did we get to this point? That's what troubles me so much, that we are at that point, and it's only going to get worse.
I think technology is part of it. I think because we have removed ourselves from so much face-to-face, and by the way, even talking on the phone or talking on the podcast is much better than just certainly text or email messages.
Yes.
I think we've detached so much from our personal, personal relationships that we've lost that edge. We've lost that edge to be real people with one another. And
children knowing how to talk to each other and play with each other. They're all, so many of these kids, especially as teenagers, they all are looking down at their phones. That's all they do.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
And we had a in my classroom when we talked about text messaging. The students would say, "Well, I got a nasty text from my roommate," and I said, "Well, what did it say?" And it said, "I'm leaving. I left the room 5 minutes ago." And I said, "Well, how do you know that was angry? Where is the intonation in the text?" So we used to laugh about it. He goes, "Well, there was no punctuation, and everything was
capitals
and caps."
Yes. So he was screaming.
Yes.
So he was screaming.
He was screaming.
Oh, okay. Now this is like 8 years ago. Now I'm like more text savvy, but and then so we started to dissect some of these text messaging and reveal, what do they mean? And so this is a language that our digital millennials, understand a lot more than like maybe you and I
depend upon much more than a real conversation. They'll say I'm talking to someone, but they're actually texting.
Right.
Yes. Totally.
So I mean,
totally.
You have that with your kids too. So, so that's why I think like even face to face. And getting back to something you said earlier, because your children are in the digital age and are digital natives, maybe, and this is just a suggestion, to have those heartfelt conversations might have to take place via text or email, because that is their primary language at this point.
You're so correct. You're so correct.
So because face to face is often awkward. When I talk psychology,
they won't answer a phone, but they'll answer a text.
68% of my students were introverted and were very uncomfortable with face to face. They were socially underdeveloped, and so face to face was really uncomfortable for them. So we oftentimes if I ever had one-on-one meetings at the end of the year for final projects and review, I would sit sideways and not look directly in their eyes because it was too uncomfortable for them. So I would speak very softly, and I wouldn't, you just have to know your audience basically. So that's a suggestion maybe for your son, is to write a heartfelt letter or email and let him read it again and again on his terms and in his time frame.
I really appreciate those tips because, where some people would feel, oh my goodness, you're talking to me. Yeah, no, you guys are talking to me, and I really, really do appreciate you taking the time out to give me some parenting tips. I do want to thank you guys because, number one, if there wasn't reason to buy 1 Billion Seconds, a fictional memoir, you basically explained it tonight, the reason why I have to go out and support this book. And, I mean, you guys were awesome. The one question I always ask our guests just before the podcast or the radio show ends, if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, wanted to find out about the book, your website, your web presence, or even if they wanted to set up an appointment, what would be the best practice? How would they get in contact with you?
They could go on our relational coaches website. It's relationalcoaches.com website. And we have a contact information. We have all that we do, what coaching is, how it differs from therapy, and we have coaching packages if they wanted to do that. We offer a 20-minute complimentary coaching to see if it's right for either one of us. And there are times, Ted, where we have referred prospective clients to a therapist because there's other more challenging concerns, or there's maybe some mental illness that
they're not ready to move forward. They still are bogged down and need to get things cleared up.
So we've gently declined and said, I don't think it's a good fit right now for either one of us. We're not going to take advantage of somebody, And our 1 Billion Seconds is the number 1 billion, BILLION, seconds.com, and that's where our book is. And
it'll direct you to Amazon, and that's where the book is offered both in paperback as well as Kindle form.
And our book, spoiler alert, big warning here, our book is very large. Think Harry Potter large. It's very
nice.
big, and we've trimmed it though, and so it's currently in its second edition printing.
So if you want the real large version, order soon before the end of the month, and somewhere in early August we'll have a new, tighter, smaller version, easier to carry to the beach if that's what you want.
Yes. People are like, I can't take this thing on a plane. It's like, okay, well then get the Kindle version. But
hopefully in another month or two, Poppy and I are going to record the book as well, so I'll have an audio version. So when you're making your commute back and forth for an hour and a half each time, you can listen to it that way.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Wow. Hey,
and we are so appreciative, Ted. Thank you so much.
It's been a blast being on with you.
Hey, I do have one final question for you guys.
Sure.
What's next? Is there another book coming after this, or kind of you just going to handle the relationship coaching? Like, what are your next steps? What do you guys envision for like the next 6 months for your practice, or all the above?
Well, right now we are just gearing up some book events and launching. We're having a premiere book launch in Milwaukee, where I'm from, in the third week in September at an independent bookseller that's pretty promising. There aren't too many of them left.
Right.
So we're setting up those events, and then organically we're also promoting our book through various book groups and book clubs, and we hope to do that. And I think what our goal is in the new year is in 2017, is to take our trademark device that we made, the emotional clock, and prepare a nonfiction sort of how to communicate with that. With that as the premise of it. So I think that's our plan.
Excellent. I want to give you guys a round of applause. You guys were wonderful.
You too.
Loved you so much. Thank you so much.
I love it.
Thank you guys so much. Love you. And if you guys ever need anything, if Late Night Parents or I can help, or in any way, or if you guys find yourself coming to the New York area,
we are.
Please.
We are going to come.
Oh.
We were thinking of coming in either end of August or September. So we're going to definitely.
Please reach out. Please reach out. Thank you guys so much, Geoff and Poppy Spencer, co-authors of the book 1 Billion Seconds, a fictional memoir. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ted. All blessings. Good luck on that drive home.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Dude, there's nothing I would change about the Burger King grill dogs.
Same. Nothing I would change either.
They're made with 100% beef. They got the grill marks on there.
Yeah, it's like grilled dogs.
Oh.
Grilled dogs.
Get a grilled dog now at Burger King, starting at just $1.99. Price and participation vary.
Dude, there's nothing I would change about the Burger King grill dogs.
Same. Nothing I would change either.
They're made with 100% beef. They got the grill marks on there.
Yeah, it's like grilled dogs.
Oh.
Grilled dogs.
Get a grilled dog now at Burger King, starting at just $1.99. Price and participation vary.